Welcome everyone to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis. I am the Director of Development here at CTC Software. And in today's session, we're going to be continuing with the Nexus Ally Admin Learning Series, focusing on the first steps on capturing object standards, later on applying and enforcing object-based standards. We're going to talk about what that means today and some strategies that you can use to kind of get ready for the next session that's going to dig even deeper into these object standards. Now, of course, as always, our webinars are recorded, so you can always come back to us on YouTube, take a look at this in the future so you can review what it is we're talking about, brush up on these, and strategize for yourself internally as you're planning to start rolling these types of Ally object-based rules out. Also, as always, for those of you who join us live, we try to keep our eyes on the questions window while we're talking about today's topic or the current topic. And so if you have questions, we encourage you to throw them into the QA window and go to webinar, and I'll try to answer them live, or we save a huge QA session for the end that doesn't actually make it onto the recording. So incentive those of you watching this as a recording to try and join us live. Without further ado, let's jump right on into the actual topic today. So the goal is to leverage Ally to help guide users in the moment, but also to take actions on your behalf, potentially not even when guidance is needed, just to fix some standards. And sometimes as we change our standards over time, it's really nice to be able to just have users open models and have those standards automatically be enforced as far as sort of object styles and categories and new settings and whatnot. And so what we're going to talk about in this session is kind of the concept of object standards, how we can reference a standardized template, helping us sort of define and manage what good content looks like. And then we're going to capture these standards in preparation for use in sort of future sessions as we actually start to apply these and building up rules that relate to these object configurations. So this is really a foundational step, and it's one that we're going to talk about now, so you can begin to plan. If you haven't already done some of this work internally, you can plan how you're going to begin to capture this. In a lot of cases, the nice thing is similar steps that we use for organizing our content within the Nexus CMS and some of the groundwork we may have pre-laid there also applies here, but we're just going to review it to make sure that we're all on sort of the same page and that you're setting yourself up for success. There's a few key objectives here that we're going to talk about. We're going to start talking a bit about what is the role of object standards in sort of driving this consistency and quality in our models. We're going to take a look at how we can capture these. We're going to kind of figure out like what does that process feel like and how long does it take. You're going to find out it doesn't actually take all that long. We are, after we talk about just how to capture it, we're going to talk about organizing and maintaining sort of a good catalog of object standards and what that means, what that looks like, so we can build that foundation for these rules in our next session based on element categories. So first off, what is the role of object-based standards, object-based rules? I'm going to jump into our portal to kind of talk about this. In the portal, I've built up one simple sample rule inside of here that is actually not targeting users. Wrong one. It's this one right here. My organization object rules right here. There's only one rule inside of this. This is targeting the entire organization as we sit today. And I'm actually going to be disabling this here in a moment. You'll find out a little bit about why as we talk about best practices. But in my rules, I have one specific text types rule that I made. And in the action of this rule, you'll notice we're doing something different here than we've done in some of our previous sessions. Our previous sessions in this series have all talked about command-based rules, where we're actually watching when a user runs a command like delete or runs a command like move or mirror or whatever. And we're interacting with the user in the moment. Well, this is slightly different. When we're focusing on objects, this is more about what is in the model while the user is opening it up. And so when I access these object rules and I take a look at the criteria, we have here some ability to select a source model from which our standards have been sourced, a source model, right? That's kind of where it's coming from. I can choose a category of objects that's been captured out of that model, like in this case, text notes. What I can do is I can find different text types that exist in that model by name. So if I have both good and bad examples, I can capture a source and I can tell it what to swap to. I can also leverage this just sort of in some free form entry where I can perhaps paste in here some text of different patterns of things that I know that I might want to use and swap from or to something else, which is actually what I had done down here. I had sourced from this model and I said, find something that matches the name Arial 1/8 inch and swap that to something that is called 1/8 inch Arial. Maybe I just did a naming convention change and I want this to correct existing text instances that exist in my model. And what will happen then is every single time somebody opens up a project model, because the scope of this is for the organization, every time anybody in my company opens up a model, if it finds a text component that is called Arial 1/8 inch, it will swap it out for the new name of 1/8 inch Arial. This is just a very simple example. This can be done on any category from the project model you've captured, or models, plural, that you may have captured, to tell it to go find something and swap it to something else. Think of this, if y'all are familiar with our BIM Manager Suite tool set from CTC, there's a toolkit in there called Type Swapper, where you can swap line styles or text types or dimension types or system families even when it finds duplicates. Think of this like a type swapper on steroids that can run every single time you open a project model if you so choose. You could have this targeting a specific project. So in my scope out here, if I took a look back at the rule set itself, I could target my entire organization, or I can target just the project itself. Now, we're not digging super deep into rule definitions today. I'm just sort of giving you an introduction as kind of what the role of this is to either apply at the organization or project level. To be clear, this does not apply at the user or group level, which is why I actually didn't go into my little sample rules that I used down here during this webinar series so far, where things were targeting me, because in my rules over here, you'll notice that you don't have the ability to target discrete users or user groups with certain rules in this aspect. It's only at the project level or organization level. So if you're not seeing the objects option here, it's probably because of the target of the rule set as a whole being user or group. So project and organization is where this is going to focus. Now, that's as far as we're going into the rule definition really today. Today's focus is more on how do we actually get into this environment for the object rules themselves, the data that comes out of our project models. Oops, wrong thing. I'm sorry, I picked commands instead of objects here. How do we get this criteria to actually pull from our standardized project models so that we can use it in the next step? And what are some strategies that you might want to use for these project models so you can actually have the proper categories and standards that you want? So that's really the focus of today. How do we capture this, quote, ideal standard? And really the way that you capture this is within Revit, with a project model open, as an admin, as a standards admin or an organization admin, up here on the ribbon, when you have Nexus itself installed in modern versions, you should see this button called Standards Synchronizer. And this button, with whatever project model it is you have open, it will scan it. It will farm from this project model the standards that exist in here, all the things that you consider valid or potentially even examples of invalid items for ease of use. And you can synchronize that into the Nexus portal environment for use. So what does that look like? Well, if I click the standards synchronizer here from within this model, it's going to do a little pre-scan of this environment. In my case, my dialog went to my other screen, but you can basically say, capture things like the object categories and subcategory representations. You can use this for some future mapping, and capture the actual project model elements so you know about the instances and types in use in this model that are considered, quote, valid, or even those that you want to correct from. So you simply check the boxes for the things that you want to capture. Most of the time I capture everything, unless you have one project model that is really quality in subcategories and categories and another model that has good use of some of that stuff. But I would typically have everything in as few models as possible. And you can go ahead and synchronize this to the Nexus portal environment. So in this case, it's telling me that I've actually already synchronized this particular model, and it wants to know if I want to replace it. And this is actually an important thing, because you may synchronize a model, you may change your mind on standards in the future and want to resync it again in the future so that you can update your standards accordingly. And in my case, yes, I actually do want to replace this with the information coming directly out of this particular project model. Now, this is going to take however long this takes, usually not very long. You can see this is progressing really quickly. This found 581 discrete Revit category and subcategory components to synchronize up, and it found 3,600, almost 3,700 individual model elements with their related types and families that it also synchronized up. So that's it. That's synchronizing the standards up into the Nexus environment so that I can use it in the portal when I'm going through the exercise of doing some mapping. Well, this seems really simple, right? Like this is about as easy as this really needs to be. You open up Standard Synchronizer if you can access it, you hit sync from a good quality model, and you're done, right? That's the end of the day. Well, not really, because there are a few strategies that you're gonna definitely want to consider before just blindly syncing a model. We as the admins in our company, we as the BIM admins and the really experienced Revit users, we need to make sure that we're not just picking a, quote, good-ish project, one that's, sort of a poster child and using it as our standards. You should actually be going through and building up some very specific, what I'll call a warehouse or a container file. Now, again, I mentioned earlier, this is probably something you've already done if you're using the Nexus CMS. You've probably built yourself a good quality warehouse that has all of your wall types. It has all of your core system families, all of your view templates. It probably has all of your schedules. It probably has all of your typical details in it. Now, I put here specifically build as few standards warehouses as you can, because I know some of our customers, some of you on this live webinar today, you probably have a warehouse that is dedicated to MEP and a warehouse that is dedicated to architecture. They may be two completely separate models. Now, if you can, I would try to combine them together into one so you have one source of truth. It's easier for you as an admin to manage that in most cases, but there are times when that does not work. Like I might have my corporate warehouse file, but I might also have customers who have sent me their standards that I have to follow, and I might be putting that into its own library within the CMS, and that's great, but that separate model is also hopefully the one source of truth, that standards warehouse from that customer or from that discipline or this practice group. However it is you divide this up, but try to keep this in as few models as possible for your own sanity. From that model, process content into the Nexus CMS, but also use that as your snapshot synchronization model so you can actually capture that data and store that into the Ally environment so you can use that for some of your object rules. That'll create sort of the best process there. And really make these warehouses as complete as you possibly can. In some cases, at least in your own corporate one, you may want to intentionally include certain typical standards deviations that you might want to try to find and correct from and correct to something else. You may want to intentionally include those in that warehouse model and just flag them in their properties as sort of a non-standard component for purging later when you build your templates from that. This way it makes it really easy in the portal environment to just choose, this is the old style or standard or type or whatever that I want to swap from. And then I also have in that same model the thing that I want to swap to. Just, again, makes it really easy. And then the next thing is, if you're going to jump ahead in this series, because we're not going to dig into this particular thing today, we're going to make this its own intentional part, which is actually next week. The next part of the series is talking about building rule sets and the actual object rules. I recommend that you build a dedicated rule set specifically for object rules. Don't mix and match these with your command rules. Have your command rules be one where you're trying to log data about what users are doing in the model or preventing certain things or warning against certain things. That should be one rule set. And I would recommend having its own dedicated rule set for these object rules, because this way you'll have the flexibility of enabling these object rules at some key interval. This way it's not always trying to do this. That might be meaningful for you, but you might not like kind of how that functions. You might want to intentionally turn on these specific object rules, enable them when you know you need to do some significant correction on a model. Have users just open the model up. When they're opening it, it'll do the thing, and you can always turn this back off later on. And that way you're really streamlining and taking the best advantage. You've predefined these rules, it runs when models are open, but then you can disable it so it's not always running and potentially elongating that model open time. Okay. So what that might look like for me in my portal, again, we're not digging super deep into the actual rules today, is I might take my organization object-based rules and simply turn this off. Whereas my master command rule list or my targeted command rules down here, those are still running. But this one here specifically is turned off for now. And then when I'm like, I know this particular project is opening, maybe I have this targeting a specific project, I can enable this to do corrections at an interval. Maybe I'm getting close to the 50% DD and I want to correct a bunch of stuff, or I'm getting closer to like a 75% CD set and I want to do a massive correction on some things. I can turn this on to do that task and then turn it back off again so it's not affecting users every single day. Once that correction's been run, it may not need to be checked again for a little while. So you'll have the flexibility of enabling and disabling this on demand. All right. So I've been keeping my eyes on the question window in case any of you had questions about any of these topics so far, and I haven't seen any questions roll through. If you do have questions, go ahead and queue them up for this particular topic. For those of you watching this as a recording, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you. We hope that you found this initial sort of ground rule, foundation laying concept meaningful. And we hope that you join us, of course, in the next one as well. So if you're watching this as a recording on our YouTube channel, we hope that you subscribe so you'll know when the next one comes out, because the next topic that's coming out is going to be all about real deep defining of these object rules and strategies and techniques you can use and how to test it as effectively as possible. Before we go there, though, I wanted to make sure you had your standards model ready so that when you capture this, you can start to define those rules in a really meaningful way.